I'm Sarah, 32, and until 6 months ago, I believed I understood my place in our family perfectly. As a marketing director for a tech startup, I knew the value of assets and investments, including the $380,000 Victorian house my grandmother left me. When my older brother Marcus hit rock bottom financially, offering his family a temporary place to stay seemed like the right thing to do. I never expected to overhear him tell his wife that I wasn't real family since I was just the adopted kid. That night, everything changed. I walked into their living room with the deed in my hand, placed it on the coffee table, and told them they had exactly 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Growing up in our small Connecticut town, I never questioned my belonging in the Chin family. Our Victorian house on Maple Street was the kind of home people slowed down to admire. 3 stories of intricate woodwork, wraparound porches, and stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across hardwood floors. Grandma Chun had bought it in the 1960s when the neighborhood was still affordable, and she spent decades restoring it to its original glory. "Sarah, dear," she would say, running her weathered fingers along the carved banister, "this house has good bones. It chooses its people, and we're lucky it chose us." She taught me to appreciate craftsmanship, to notice the way light moved through rooms, and to understand that some things gain value not just monetarily, but through the love invested in them. Marcus was 4 years older than me, and our relationship had always been complicated. Where I was methodical and driven, he was impulsive and charming. While I spent summers working at the local library to save for college, Marcus convinced his friends to loan him money for get-rich-quick schemes that inevitably failed. His senior year of high school, he borrowed $3,000 from Grandma to start a lawn care business, promising to pay her back with interest. The equipment sat unused in our garage after 2 weeks when he decided the work was beneath him. Despite these early warning signs, I maintained hope that Marcus would eventually mature. After graduating from UConn with a marketing degree, I landed an entry-level position at a Hartford advertising agency. The work was demanding, long hours, difficult clients, constant pressure to prove myself in a competitive field. But I thrived on the challenge, and by 26, I had been promoted to senior account manager. That same year, I received an offer from Innovate Solutions, a growing tech startup in Boston. The salary was substantial, the benefits excellent, and the opportunity to shape marketing strategy from the ground up was exactly what I'd been working toward. The hardest part was telling Grandma I'd be moving 3 hours away. "Boston is a good city for ambitious young women," she said, though I caught the slight tremor in her voice. "Your grandfather and I honeymooned there in 1962. You'll do wonderful things, Sarah. Just promise you'll come home often." I kept that promise religiously, driving back to Connecticut every few weeks to spend time with Grandma. Marcus lived just 20 minutes away with his wife Jennifer and their twins, Emma and Tyler, but his visits were sporadic and usually coincided with needing financial help. During my visits, Grandma would mention casually that Marcus had stopped by for a quick chat or needed a small loan to tide him over until payday. When I was 28, Grandma's health began declining noticeably. The woman who had once climbed ladders to paint shutters now struggled with stairs. She developed diabetes and heart problems, but refused to admit she needed help. During one visit, I found her sitting on the kitchen floor, too weak to stand after dropping a glass of water. "I'm fine, dear," she insisted as I helped her to a chair. "Just a momentary dizzy spell." That evening, I called Marcus. "We need to talk about Grandma. She can't keep living alone like this." "She's stubborn," he replied, the sound of a television loud in the background. "You know how she is about independence. Besides, Jennifer and I have our hands full with the twins starting school." "I'm 3 hours away, Marcus. You're 20 minutes. She needs family close by." "Look, Sarah, not all of us can drop everything for family drama. Some of us have real responsibilities." His dismissive tone stung, but I focused on the immediate problem. Over the following months, I arranged for a home health aide to visit Grandma twice weekly, organized grocery delivery services, and hired a handyman for basic maintenance. The expenses added up quickly, but Grandma's safety was worth any cost. Marcus's financial situation, meanwhile, seemed to worsen continuously. He'd been fired from his job at a car dealership for what he called personality conflicts with management, though I suspected there was more to the story. Jennifer worked part-time at a dental office, but with two 7-year-olds and Marcus's spotty employment history, they struggled to make ends meet. "Could you help us with rent this month?" became a regular request during our phone calls. Just until I get back on my feet. I helped when I could, partly out of family loyalty and partly because I worried about Emma and Tyler. They were bright, curious children who deserved stability despite their father's poor decisions. Grandma's condition deteriorated rapidly the following spring. What began as increased fatigue progressed to confusion and mobility issues. After she fell in the bathroom and couldn't get up for hours, I made the difficult decision to take extended leave from work and move back home temporarily. My boss, David, was understanding but concerned. "Sarah, you're one of our top performers. I'll hold your position for 3 months, but we can't wait indefinitely." I rented out my Boston apartment and moved into Grandma's house, sleeping in my childhood bedroom and spending my days managing her care. We established routines, morning medications, afternoon walks when she felt strong enough, evening conversations about family history and neighborhood gossip. During these talks, she shared stories I'd never heard before, including details about my adoption that I'd always known but rarely discussed. "You were 6 months old when your parents brought you to us," she said one evening as we sat on the front porch. "The sweetest baby, with those serious dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Your mother, my daughter, she and your father tried for years to have children naturally. When they found you, it was like a miracle." "Do you ever think about my birth parents?" I asked. Grandma considered this carefully. "I think about them with gratitude. They gave you life, but they also gave you to us. That takes tremendous love and courage." Marcus's visits during this period were infrequent and brief. He'd arrive with the children, stay long enough for Grandma to give them cookies and small gifts, then leave after asking for money in hushed conversations by the front door. Jennifer rarely came inside, preferring to wait in the car, checking her phone and looking impatient. "Marcus says work is really stressful right now," Grandma would explain after these visits. "He's doing his best to provide for his family." I bit back my frustration, knowing that arguing would only upset her. But watching her hand in cash from her limited pension while I covered medical expenses and daily care needs made my resentment grow. 3 months into my leave, Grandma's health took a serious downturn. She was hospitalized for pneumonia that led to complications with her heart condition. I spent every day at the hospital, managing communications with doctors and making difficult decisions about her care. Marcus visited twice during her 2-week stay, both times briefly and both times leaving with money for parking and gas. "She doesn't look good," he said after the second visit, stating the obvious. "How long do they think?" "The doctors aren't making predictions," I replied, exhausted from sleepless nights and constant worry. "We're taking it day by day." "Well, keep me posted," he said, then paused. "Hey, do you think you could cover Emma's dance classes this month? With the hospital parking fees and everything, we're stretched pretty thin." I stared at him, incredulous. "Marcus, Grandma might be dying and you're worried about dance classes?" He looked defensive. "Life goes on, Sarah. The kids need normalcy." I paid for the dance classes, but something fundamental shifted in my perception of my brother that day. Grandma came home from the hospital weaker but determined to spend her remaining time in the house she loved. Hospice nurses visited daily, and I coordinated her care while working remotely when possible. My Boston job hung in the balance, but I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. During what turned out to be her final week, Grandma had several lucid moments where she wanted to discuss practical matters. "I've updated my will," she told me one afternoon as we sat in her favorite sunroom. "Mr. Patterson has all the documents. The house will go to you, Sarah." "Grandma, we don't need to talk about this now," I said, though I was secretly relieved. I'd been wondering how her assets would be divided. "Yes, we do," she insisted with surprising firmness. "I've left Marcus some money, $15,000, but the house and most of my savings will be yours. You've proven yourself responsible and you love this place the way I do." "What about Marcus? Won't he be upset?" Grandma sighed deeply. Marcus is my grandson, and I love him. But love doesn't mean enabling someone's poor choices indefinitely. He needs to learn to stand on his own feet, and inheriting a house wouldn't teach him that lesson. She passed away peacefully on a Thursday morning in early October, holding my hand as autumn sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows she'd always loved. I called Marcus immediately, and he arrived 40 minutes later, crying genuine tears that reminded me of the little boy he'd once been. The funeral was small but meaningful, with neighbors and family friends sharing memories of Grandma's kindness and community spirit. Marcus delivered a heartfelt eulogy about her strength and generosity, and for a moment, I felt connected to him again through our shared grief. The will reading took place the following week in Mr. Patterson's oak-paneled office. As Grandma had indicated, the house and the majority of her assets came to me, while Marcus received $15,000 in cash. Mr. Patterson also revealed that Grandma had specifically requested that I be given first right of refusal if Marcus ever wanted to sell his inheritance back to keep the money in the family. Marcus listened silently, his expression unreadable. When Mr. Patterson finished, he stood abruptly. "I need some air," he said, and walked out without looking at me. That evening he called. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Jennifer, and I need to talk to you about something. Can we come over?" They arrived an hour later, both looking serious. Jennifer had been crying, and Marcus kept clearing his throat nervously. "Here's the situation," Marcus began without preamble. "We're behind on rent, 3 months behind. The landlord is starting eviction proceedings, and we have nowhere to go." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "How can I help?" Jennifer spoke up, her voice shaky. "We were hoping we could move into the house temporarily, just until we get back on our feet financially." The request wasn't entirely unexpected, but I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "For how long?" 6 months, Marcus said. "Maybe 8 at most. Just until I find steady work and we can save for a security deposit on a new place." I studied their faces, seeing desperation mixed with expectation. The house was indeed sitting empty while I figured out my next steps. My Boston job was gone. David had hired a replacement after I extended my leave indefinitely. I was living on savings while deciding whether to stay in Connecticut or relocate again. "What about rent?" I asked. "The property taxes and utilities alone are significant." "We'd contribute what we can," Marcus said. "Maybe not full market rent, but something reasonable. We're family, surely we can work something out." After several days of consideration, I agreed to a 6-month arrangement. Marcus and his family would move into the house, contribute $800 monthly toward utilities and maintenance, and use this time to stabilize their finances. I would stay in Boston, where I'd found a temporary consulting position, and visit monthly to check on the property. "You're saving our lives, Sarah," Jennifer said when I handed over the keys, tears in her eyes. "Emma and Tyler are so excited to have their own rooms again." "Just remember this is temporary," I emphasized. 6 months, and then I'll need to make permanent decisions about the house." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed quickly. "By then, we'll have saved enough for our own place. This gives us exactly the fresh start we need." I helped them move in over the weekend, watching as the twins explored the house with delight. Emma, always the leader, immediately claimed the blue bedroom that had been mine as a child. Tyler, more reserved, chose the smaller room, overlooking the garden. Seeing their excitement made me feel good about my decision, despite lingering concerns about Marcus's track record. "We'll take excellent care of everything," Jennifer promised as we carried boxes from their U-Haul. "This house is like a palace compared to our old apartment." I returned to Boston feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this arrangement would help Marcus finally get his life together while preserving the family home I wasn't quite ready to sell. My consulting work was engaging, and I threw myself into projects while trying to decide on my long-term career path. Our weekly check-in calls went smoothly initially. Marcus assured me everything was fine with the house, the twins were thriving in their new school, and he was actively job hunting. When I visited after the first month, I found the house reasonably well maintained, though there was more clutter than I was used to and some minor wear from active children.
See?
We're taking good care of your investment, Marcus said, gesturing around the living room where toys were scattered and new furniture I didn't recognize filled the space. Our investment, I corrected gently. This house means as much to you as it does to me. Something flickered in his expression, but he nodded.
Right.
Family home and all that. By the third month, small issues began emerging. Marcus mentioned casually that they were a little short on their monthly contribution due to unexpected expenses. Tyler needed glasses, Emma's school had field trip fees, Jennifer's car needed repairs. Each month brought a new excuse, but I tried to be understanding, knowing that raising children was expensive. More concerning were the changes I noticed during my monthly visits. The once pristine gardens Grandma had maintained were overgrown with weeds. Inside, I spotted water stains on the ceiling that suggested a roof leak, and several windows had screens that were torn or missing entirely. There's been a small leak in the upstairs bathroom, Marcus admitted when I pointed out the water damage. I've been meaning to call a plumber, but with work being so crazy. Marcus, roof leaks can cause serious structural damage. This needs immediate attention. I know. I'll take care of it this week, I promise. But when I called the following week to check on the repairs, Marcus's phone went straight to voicemail. When he finally called back 2 days later, he claimed he'd been incredibly busy with job interviews and hadn't had time to address the leak yet. I need to know what happened to Grandma's antique dining set and the carved bookshelf that was in the living room. There was a long pause. Look, Sarah, we had to sell a few pieces. Emma needed medical care. She had to go to the emergency room last month, and insurance didn't cover everything. You sold Grandma's furniture without asking me? They were just sitting there collecting dust, he said defensively. And we're facing real financial pressure here. I thought you'd understand. I closed my eyes, trying to control my anger. Marcus, those pieces belonged to our family for decades. They had sentimental value beyond any monetary worth. Well, sentiment doesn't pay medical bills, he snapped. Not all of us have the luxury of worrying about antiques when there are real problems to solve. The conversation ended badly, with Marcus hanging up after accusing me of being out of touch with reality and caring more about old furniture than family welfare. I spent that night researching the value of the pieces he'd sold, discovering they were worth significantly more than he'd likely received from a quick sale. My friend Lisa, who worked in estate sales, was horrified when I told her what had happened. Sarah, you need to get control of this situation immediately. If he's willing to sell family heirlooms without permission, what else might he do? But they're struggling financially, I said, though my conviction was wavering. Emma really did need medical care. Then he should have called you for help, not sold irreplaceable family treasures. This is a huge red flag. As winter settled over Connecticut, my monthly visits revealed increasingly troubling changes. The house felt different, colder somehow, despite the heating bills I was still paying. Family photos had been removed from walls and replaced with generic artwork. Grandma's carefully curated book collection had been reduced to a fraction of its original size, with gaps on the shelves where valuable first editions had once stood. When I confronted Marcus about the missing books during my December visit, he was dismissive. Jennifer needed space for the kids' things. We donated some old books to the library. It's not like anyone was reading them anyway. Some of those books were signed first editions, Marcus. They were worth thousands of dollars. Well, now some other family can enjoy them, he said with a shrug. Isn't that what Grandma would have wanted? I felt a surge of anger at his casual manipulation of Grandma's memory. What Grandma would have wanted was for her possessions to stay in the family or be sold thoughtfully if necessary, with the proceeds benefiting all of us. Look, Sarah, you don't live here. You don't see the day-to-day struggles we're facing. It's easy to judge from your comfortable consulting income in Boston. That comment stung because there was a grain of truth in it. I was making good money, and I didn't have children to support. But I also hadn't agreed to let them live in the house, so they could systematically strip it of valuable belongings. The final straw came during an unannounced visit in January. I'd been in Connecticut for a client meeting and decided to stop by the house without calling ahead. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed several cars I didn't recognize parked on the lawn, leaving tire tracks in the frozen grass. The sound of loud music and laughter reached me before I got to the front door. Using my key, I entered to find the house filled with strangers. At least 15 people crowded into the living room and kitchen, drinking and talking loudly. The smell of cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air, despite Grandma's lifelong no-smoking rule. I stood in the doorway, stunned. This was clearly not just a few friends over for dinner. This was a full-blown party in my family's home. Sarah, Jennifer appeared beside me, clearly startled by my unexpected arrival. She was wearing a cocktail dress I'd never seen before and jewelry that looked expensive. "We weren't expecting you, obviously," I said, surveying the chaos around us. "What is this?" "Just a small get-together," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Marcus's birthday was last week, and we wanted to celebrate." I looked around the room at the crowd of people I'd never met, all drinking and smoking in the house where my grandmother had lived and died. On the mantelpiece, where Grandma's ashes had sat in a beautiful urn, I spotted beer bottles and ashtrays. "Where are Marcus and the twins?" I asked. "The kids are at my mother's for the weekend," Jennifer replied. "And Marcus is—" She looked around vaguely. "Somewhere around here." I moved through the crowd, increasingly appalled by what I saw. The hardwood floors that Grandma had lovingly maintained were scuffed and stained. Someone had ground cigarette ashes into the Persian rug in the dining room. The kitchen counters were covered with empty bottles and food debris. I found Marcus on the back porch, talking animatedly with a group of men I didn't recognize. He was clearly intoxicated, gesturing wildly with a beer bottle as he told some story that had his companions laughing loudly. "Marcus," I called out, trying to get his attention over the noise. He turned, and his face went through several expressions: surprise, guilt, and finally defiance. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, stepping onto the porch. "What is all this?" "Just having some friends over," he said, his words slightly slurred. "It's Saturday night. People are allowed to socialize, aren't they?" "Not like this. Not in Grandma's house." I gestured toward the chaos visible through the sliding door. "This place is being destroyed." One of his friends, a man with tattoos covering his arms, laughed. "This is your uptight sister? The one who thinks she owns the place." "I do own the place," I said firmly, my temper beginning to flare. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice taking on a confrontational tone I'd rarely heard before, "this is a family home. My family lives here." "Temporarily," I reminded him. "And this isn't what we agreed to." "What we agreed to?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You mean what you dictated? The terms you set because you inherited everything." His friends were watching this exchange with interest, clearly enjoying the drama. I realized this wasn't the time or place for this conversation. "We need to talk privately," I said. "Can you ask your guest to leave?" "No," Marcus said flatly. "This is my home now, and these are my friends. If you don't like it, you can leave." I stared at him, shocked by his blatant disrespect.
Fine.
"But we're going to discuss this tomorrow, when you're sober." I drove back to Boston that night, my hands shaking with anger and disappointment. The image of strangers partying in Grandma's house, treating her beloved home like a fraternity hangout, played on repeat in my mind. I'd try to help Marcus by providing him with a safe place for his family, and he'd repaid that kindness by treating the house like his personal property. The next morning, I called him repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I finally reached Jennifer in the afternoon, she was defensive and dismissive. "It wasn't that bad," she said. "Just a few friends celebrating. You're making it sound like we trashed the place." There were cigarette burns on the mantelpiece, Jennifer. Someone spilled red wine on the dining room carpet. The house reeked of smoke. "We'll clean everything up," she promised. "It's not permanent damage." "That's not the point. The point is that you violated the trust one placed in you. This was supposed to be a temporary arrangement to help your family, not an opportunity to turn the house into party central." Look, Sarah, we appreciate what you've done for us, but we're not your tenants. We're family. We deserve some consideration and respect. Respect. I repeated, incredulous. How is destroying my grandmother's home showing respect? The conversation ended with Jennifer hanging up on me. Over the next few days, I tried reaching Marcus multiple times, but he avoided my calls. When I finally got him on the phone, he was unrepentant. You're overreacting, he said. It was one party. We're allowed to live our lives. It wasn't one party, Marcus. This has been building for months. The missing furniture, the damaged property, the unpaid bills. You've been taking advantage of this situation from the beginning. Taking advantage? His voice rose angrily. I'm trying to provide for my family in impossible circumstances. Not everyone has the luxury of a trust fund kid lifestyle. I don't have a trust fund, I said, stung by the accusation. I work for everything I have.
Right.
And everything you have includes a house you didn't earn, money you didn't work for, and a family that isn't even really yours. The words hung in the air like a slap. What did you say? You heard me. You act like you're more entitled to Grandma's things than I am, but you're not even really part of this family. You're adopted, Sarah. You're not a real Chun. I felt the air leave my lungs. In all our years of conflict, Marcus had never used my adoption against me. It was cruel and calculated, designed to hurt me in the deepest possible way. I can't believe you just said that, I whispered. It's the truth. You were 6 months old when Mom and Dad took you in because they felt sorry for you. But blood is blood, and Emma and Tyler are Grandma's real great-grandchildren, not you. I hung up without another word, my entire body shaking with hurt and rage. For the first time in my life, my adoption, something I'd always seen as a testament to my parents' love, was being weaponized against me. That evening, I called Mr. Patterson. I need to discuss options for removing Marcus and his family from the house. What's happened? He asked, and I explained the situation, the parties, the missing belongings, the unpaid bills, and finally, Marcus's cruel comments about my adoption. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Sarah, he said gently. But from a legal standpoint, you're in a strong position. The arrangement was clearly temporary, documented in writing, and they violated the terms multiple times. You can begin eviction proceedings immediately. How long would that take? Given the circumstances and their failure to pay agreed-upon contributions, probably 30 days. Maybe less if they don't contest it. I spent the rest of the evening staring out my apartment window at the Boston skyline, trying to process the magnitude of Marcus's betrayal. Using my adoption as a weapon wasn't just cruel, it revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of what family meant. I'd been chosen, wanted, loved. That made me more a Chun, not less. The next morning, I called Lisa for support. After I explained what had happened, she was furious on my behalf. Sarah, you have to protect yourself and Grandma's legacy. Marcus is systematically destroying everything she worked to preserve. But what about Emma and Tyler? They're innocent in all this. They have parents who are responsible for providing them with housing. That's not your job, especially when those parents are actively harming your interests. She was right, but it didn't make the decision easier. I spent the weekend researching family law and eviction procedures, preparing myself for what would undoubtedly be an ugly confrontation. On Monday, I drove back to Connecticut with legal documents and a heavy heart. I decided to give Marcus one final chance to salvage the situation and our relationship. I found him at the house alone, the twins at school, and Jennifer at work. He was watching television in Grandma's living room, surrounded by the same clutter and damage I'd seen before. We need to talk, I said, taking a seat across from him. He muted the TV, but didn't look at me. If you're here to lecture me about the party, save it. We cleaned everything up. It's not about the party, Marcus. It's about what you said to me on the phone. About me being adopted. He shrugged. I was angry. People say things when they're angry. No, people reveal what they really think when they're angry. Is that how you've always seen me? As not really part of the family. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Look, Sarah, I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? He was quiet for a long moment. It's just you got everything. The house, the money, Grandma's attention. And yeah, sometimes I wondered if it was because you were the chosen one, the special project. His words confirmed my worst fears about his motivations. So, you think I don't deserve what Grandma left me because I was adopted? I think family money should stay with family blood, he said, meeting my eyes directly. Emma and Tyler are Grandma's biological great-grandchildren. This house should be their inheritance. I pulled the eviction notice from my purse and placed it on the coffee table between us. Then I guess we don't have anything more to discuss. You have 30 days to vacate the property. Marcus stared at the document, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and panic. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Sarah, come on. We're family. You can't just throw us out on the street. According to you, we're not family. I'm just the adopted kid who doesn't deserve what she inherited. I was angry. No, I interrupted. You were honest. And honestly, Marcus, you show me exactly what kind of person you are. You've stolen from this house, damaged it, disrespected it, and used my adoption as a weapon against me. I'm done. He stood up, beginning to pace. Where are we supposed to go? The kids love it here. They've made friends at school. That's your responsibility to figure out. You've had 6 months to save money and find permanent housing. Instead, you've been treating this place like your personal ATM and party venue. What about the $15,000 from Grandma's will? You could use that to help us find a place. I laughed bitterly. The money that was meant to give you a fresh start? The money you've probably already spent on parties and who knows what else. His silence confirmed my suspicions. You have 30 days, Marcus. After that, the sheriff will remove you and your belongings. I left him sitting in Grandma's living room, staring at the eviction notice with dawning realization that his manipulations had finally backfired. The next few weeks were a nightmare of angry phone calls, pleading text messages, and attempted guilt trips. Jennifer called crying, begging me to reconsider for the sake of the children. Marcus alternated between rage and desperation, threatening legal action one day and promising to reform the next. You're destroying this family, became his constant refrain. Grandma would be ashamed of you. But I held firm, supported by friends like Lisa and my therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, who helped me process the complex emotions surrounding the situation. Setting boundaries with family members who've betrayed your trust isn't cruel, she assured me. It's necessary for your own well-being and self-respect. The eviction proceeded on schedule. On the appointed day, I arrived to find a moving truck in the driveway and the family packing their belongings. Emma and Tyler looked confused and sad, not fully understanding why they had to leave the house they'd grown to love. Emma approached me as I stood watching from the sidewalk. Aunt Sarah? Are you mad at us? No, sweetheart, I said, kneeling to her level. I'm not mad at you or Tyler. Sometimes adults have disagreements about grown-up things. Daddy says you don't want us to live in Grandma's house anymore. I chose my words carefully. This house needs someone who will take very good care of it, the way Grandma did. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. Marcus appeared beside us, his face hard with resentment. Come on, Emma. We need to finish packing. As they loaded the last of their belongings, Jennifer approached me. I hope you're satisfied, she said bitterly. You've gotten your revenge. This was never about revenge, I replied. It was about protecting something that mattered to our family. Your family, Marcus corrected, appearing with a box in his arms. Not ours. You made that very clear. They drove away, without looking back, leaving me standing in front of the house that was finally, fully mine again. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the loss of relationships I'd hoped could be salvaged. Over the following months, I threw myself into restoring the house to its former condition. Some damage was irreversible, stains that couldn't be removed, scratches that required refinishing, missing pieces that could never be replaced. But slowly, with patience and significant expense, I brought Grandma's home back to life. I decided not to sell the house after all. Instead, I moved back to Connecticut permanently, using my consulting income to maintain the property while I figured out my next career move. The house felt peaceful again, filled with Grandma's presence and free from the chaos Marcus had brought to it. 6 months after the eviction, I received an unexpected text from Marcus. "Can we talk?" We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Hartford where neither of us had history. Marcus looked tired, older somehow, with new lines around his eyes. "How are the kids?" I asked, genuinely concerned about Emma and Tyler. "Adjusting," he said. "We found an apartment in West Hartford. It's smaller, but it's ours." "And Jennifer?" His expression darkened.
"She left."
Said she couldn't handle the downgrade in lifestyle. "She's living with her parents while we work out custody arrangements." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry, Marcus." "Are you?" he asked, studying my face. "Because sometimes I think you planned this whole thing to punish me." "I didn't plan anything. I offered you help, and you threw it back in my face." We sat in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes before Marcus spoke again. "I owe you an apology, Sarah. What I said about you being adopted, that was unforgivable." Yes, it was. I was desperate and angry, and I lashed out at the thing I knew would hurt you most. But I've had time to think about